Ooh.
So,
okay. Do you know what I might do? Let's have a look, actually. Let's see if I don't do presentation view. What slides can you see now?
I don't see slide number. Oh yeah, 2. I can see slide 2 now.
Yeah, let's just leave it in this format.
This format.
Yeah, let's see how we get on then. Okay. So yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, this is an overall plan of the city, and we can kind of see the line of the canals going around the edge there. And this is not the full, the Dublin City Council boundary goes beyond this, but this is the kind of the city centre we're doing a lot of focus on at the moment. In 2016, Dublin City Council Parks Department worked with UCD Geography on doing a mapping of the canopy cover of the city. And what that showed was a large deficit of tree cover across the city, and especially when we compared ourselves to other European cities. And this is actually a more recent map done by UCD Geography in 2017 as part of a Mapping Green Dublin project. Here, the red is talking about high rank. So high rank is associated with high population, high traffic flow, and low tree cover. And that's kind of, all the red is there is kind of within the canal boundaries. So yeah, since 2016, to address this deficit, greening strategies have been planned by Dublin City Council, and they started with the Liberties, and that's where the Bridgefoot Street Park, which Roisin was mentioning, is, and that took, 2016, so it's 6 years later that park's been implemented. But since then, we've done the Northeast Inner City, which is the area in yellow here, and then we've identified as well the Stony Batter. And when I started 3 years ago, that was one of my first projects. So I got going on trying to figure out how we were going to develop the greening strategy for that area. And this is a closer in map. Like, there is green spaces to the east and west of the site, but they weren't kind of part of the day-to-day interaction, accessibility for residents. They're not like on your doorstep. So I suppose the projects that we were interested in is kind of creating micro spaces, enhancing the tree canopy cover. And so we started to look at that in 2019. The tree canopy cover in this area is below 5%. And this is in contrast to 10.2% for the total lands managed by Dublin City Council. And there's less than 1.6 meters squared of green open space compared to 49 square meters for the rest of Dublin City Council. So there was really a deficit. So this was our starting point in really identifying this as a site where we would begin working. Specific to Stony Batter really was a strong, rich history of community action and community authorship. So that was, that exists in the rest of Dublin, but it was very specific to Stony Batter. So we saw this as an opportunity to say, well, what could it look like to really delve into doing a co-authored strategy with the residents of this area. So we initiated the co-design, and this was something that I did earlier on, with just doing walking interviews with about, I think there was about 10 to 15 people, and that really knew the area. And that was the first step in us mapping and starting to develop the brief for how we would start to work with residents in this area. We also followed this on with a focus group with a bunch of, I think it was about 20 key stakeholders. So that include councillors, community, people who are leading the community in different groups, to really get a sense of, what would the invitation look like? How would we start to collaborate with residents living here, and how would we make sure to reach as many residents as possible? So these are just some quotes from some of those conversations, but there was, there was quite a large form of conversations that, helped to establish how we were going to move forward. So following that early stakeholder research, we started to define a brief. And so we put that brief out to build a consultation team. So that included public realm designers, urban agency, ecologist Mary Tuberty, and facilitator Dave Dunn. And so over 8 months, we ran a co-design process to work with local residents to develop this vision. This was just some of the conversations that involved in trying to figure out what was the level of participation that we were looking at in terms of how we were going to work with residents. Working within the council, it the history of consultation, I think, is varied. You know, there's some teams doing very deep consultation, some doing nothing at all. You know, roads projects, you know, it's all strategic policy stuff. There's hardly any conversations. It's just stuff just lands on people's streets. So we were trying to figure out, well, where are we pitching this? So we aimed high. You know, we reviewing the International Association for Public Participation. They've got a really lovely review of this and trying to see, well, where do we sit within that? And so this is their words. Our ambition was to partner with the public in each aspect of the decision, including the development of alternatives and identification of preferred solution. And this was our promise made to the residents. So, you know, this was my intention, our intention as a team. And, you know, I had worked as part of the council before. I had worked as a consultant working for the council, but not within it. So, you know, I didn't have the understanding of the levels of different departments that we would have to be working with. So we were ambitious about that. So this was our invitation. We worked with graphic designers. We put the invitation all around the neighborhood, online, through social media. And this was calling people to take part in a number of public meetings, and also to meet us to do a number of public walks as well. So we had 2 large public workshops, and then we organized a number of walks as well with our tree officer, biodiversity officer, and the design team, to kind of collectively map the streets and start to build an understanding of Stoneybatter through the people who really know Stoneybatter. And, you know, we have this tool of the mobile radio. This is just kind of a playful tool to engage people in conversation. So that was brought to the workshops, you know, having these conversations out within the public realm. So really starting to understand the area through the residents who live there. And so this was a long process, but we then the final part of this was we developed a workbook. And this workbook was a method for people to make submissions for ideas for greening interventions on their street. And there were certain rules within this book, and specific to that was that you had to submit with at least 3 people. So we were encouraging people to collaborate, to talk with their neighbours, and really trying to kind of offset the burden of a design team and having to consult with all residents, trying to kind of work with residents who would potentially do that on our behalf. So by the end of the process, we received 41 ideas by community groups and individuals outlining their ideas for projects within their streets and neighborhoods. And all of these ideas were combined with the more desktop and studies by the biodiversity officer, our public realm studies. Sorry, these slides are blurry, but that all ended up with our greening strategy map, which was a long list of projects that we intended to look at implementing over. We gave ourselves a 5-year plan. And these were different themes to do with tree planting, improving existing parks, and wayfinding. And over 250 people actually participated in this process. And then this is our document. Okay, so what do we do with that? That was about a year and a half ago. So our next steps is, okay, we now need to implement. And, you know, this previous stage, you know, we had collaborated with our colleagues in traffic, but it was very high level. Our next stage was like, right, well, we now really want to implement the project. And so that really involves a continuation of the process, but actually working more focused with groups. So those groups that actually had submitted ideas to us, that was our starting point. And they were kind of our people on the ground. And specific to this was a road, Harold Road, where 3 residents came together and actually set up a working group for this project. And this is just a slide of, you know, all the different parameters that we're looking at and focusing in now on a project, tree planting on a street, you know, utilities study, you know, trying to make sure that the street character is retained. The biggest thing of this project was parking. For every person who wanted a tree, someone else really didn't, and they did not want us to take our parking. And it was just an interesting process to go through, because all of the people that we've been working with and developing the strategy, they were the people who wanted the projects. The project, this step into actually implementing, was a lot of the people who didn't. And this is where all the challenges came. So it was the residents who were uncertain. There was, you know, the loss aversion theory coming into play, that people have the fear of what's coming rather than actually knowing what it might be in reality. So because we had no template projects in place, we couldn't really communicate to residents exactly what it was going to be. So this was very challenging. I think on Harold Road, we did up to 50 different iterations of the plan, but that was all working closely with this working group of residents. I'm sorry, I know I'm probably going over time. So this is just some surveys that local residents had done on our behalf. Who wanted trees, who didn't, what their concerns was, what their feelings were about the project. Finally, after a year of projects, we then did final leaflet drops to residents to say this is the plan. After that, we still got feedback from residents feeling concerned, and some of them brought them to all of their councillors. They got quite detailed. This was one particular group of residents who were very concerned about shade, so we did shade studies to show them what the influence would be. This was the phrase that kind of was just really interesting, and one of the consultation from one of the residents says the bees can go somewhere else. And it was just really good for her to say that to me, because when you're working with the willing, you don't suddenly hear the negative. So for her to be able to say that and for us to have that conversation, it just built a kind of an awareness of what we needed to do is to understand everyone's needs and address those needs. And I'm focusing on the residents who are for and against, because to be honest with you, that was the most challenging thing of these projects. Getting the money, figuring out about the utilities, the kind of the technical aspects. We can achieve that, but it's getting the residents on board and having a buy-in is absolutely essential, and especially when we're working within the council, because the councillors and the area office meetings are key to our projects going ahead and key to it's the politics of these projects. So yeah, these are some of the projects, early wins, murals, identifying the projects, some small scale projects in terms of working with residents on one of the lanes, some of the larger projects that we've started to implement. And so now we're actually getting a bit of ground. We've just installed 20 trees in the last few weeks, and they're just actually getting planted tomorrow. Sorry, this image I just took yesterday, it's a bit blurry, but that's where we're at now. And we've installed as well a nature play space, and that's just about complete. And now that we've developed a rhythm, and I feel like we've got over the hurdle in terms of the residents who weren't sure, because they've started to see projects and there's a bit of momentum with residents who want these projects. And this was just something that we did. We had some planters left over from a traffic project. We wouldn't necessarily be putting planters in because they're expensive and they're not sustainable. But because we had them, we decided to test a project on a street. And this was a much quicker way to get the project moving, because it put the object into the public space and it became a conversation starter. And so this is what we're going to do now over the next few years. We're going to be implementing trees on this street next year. We'll move the planters to another street and hopefully just keep on moving. But sorry, that's me for today. Sorry, it was very lot to get through. I might have gone over time, but a quick overview of the Stony Batter greening process.
Thanks very much, Suzanne. That's a really deep look at what goes on just to try and plant trees and create a strategy. And it's I feel like this thing of kind of working with the willing and getting those other voices and allowing the time for that and the depth of that process. I don't think it happens everywhere that we get that much time to work with people, and I see over and over again that it's really good when we do, especially areas like inner city Dublin or inner city Glasgow. It must be the same any cities like that. So thank you very much. We'll talk more at the end. Colm, delighted to introduce Colm Edifor, and he's going to talk to us about oh my god. Tell me, I got rid of it.
Yeah, no, you Forest. So let me just.
Sorry,
that's okay, no problem. Let me just share my screen here as well. I hope I have the possibility to do that. And can you all see my screen? Yeah, great.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. And I'll just minimize. Okay, you all. Yeah, so I'm going to speak about actually transforming cities through entrepreneurship education. And exploring and facilitating innovation through entrepreneurship education, starting at grassroots level, but also with the existing knowledge and experience of practitioners, professionals already working in the sector, but in need of new approaches, training and awareness in relation to solutions that already exist or are emerging. So yeah, and I'm here representing, well, first of all, the ET4 Value Nature, the company that I work for, and I lead the international project development team there. And I'm also wearing the hat of Connecting Nature, a sustainable forestry community ambassador, and the project manager for ET4 for UForest, the project that I will explore today. So for those of you joining from UForest, you can also have a look at what we've been doing for the Connecting Nature community, the sustainable forestry community. There's some interesting work going on there, and vice versa for the Connecting Nature team. Once I finish this, you can begin to explore the work we've been doing in UForest for urban forestry nature-based solutions. Okay. So just to take a step back, following Suzanne's wonderful overview of what's going on in Stony Batter, really interesting, and some names popped up as well, Suzanne, that we'll have to touch base on afterwards that I'm familiar with, for example. So Mary Tuberty, I think you mentioned, and I'd be curious to know what Mary is doing there. But anyway, to take a step back, we're quite familiar with some of these trends, some more than others. I'm based in Italy now, where urbanization trends, especially you get a lot of these increasing urbanization trends from younger age groups moving down from areas in the Alps where maybe there's lack of employment and so on. This is one example in the European context, but it happens all over the world. And you can see here that in European context, in your urbanization trends are forecasted to increase by up to 84% by 2050. So it's a huge increase and pressure above all on our urban areas and peri-urban areas, and what's that going to mean for infrastructure and quality of life. And some of the issues associated with these urbanization trends tend to be obviously the one we're quite familiar with, or becoming more and more familiar with, is climate change and air pollution, as opposed to the increasing urbanization trends, more traffic, more energy consumption, and so on. And this then tends to have a negative impact as well on our health and well-being, especially from the more delicate, let's say, age groups, categories. But there are also benefits in that, in urban forests and the enhancing the use and access and space of urban forests. The ecological benefits, like biodiversity, as we've seen with the bees in the previous example, climatic in relation to reducing heat island effects, the heat of cities, especially as climate change tends to, the effects of climate change would tend to have negative impacts on the cities as time goes on. Economic, so the economic opportunities as well in relation to urban forests, and social, above all, social as in it can be, for example, meeting places, picnics, sports activities, and then psychosocial, obviously the mental health and well-being, and all these emerging science relate to the psychosocial, the psychophysical as well. Benefits of ecosystem services related to urban forestry and urban forests. Okay, so we know that urban forests represent an efficient tool to better adapt, mitigate, and navigate negative effects of climate change, and we've seen some of them in urbanization. So heat island effect, of course, bad air quality, poor air quality, and then the health and physical and mental health and well-being, the negative impacts on that. So if we know there's a solution, why is there such a struggle in relation to implementing this solution? There are different challenges. In this project, we explored some of the challenges. Some of these included the high related costs, above all in cities like Dublin, which I'm also familiar with, originally from Ireland, but now based in Italy, and also in Milan, where I lived. Again, high related costs were a huge issue in relation to application development and exploration even of urban forestry nature-based solutions, specifically when you're trying to identify and get access to new green space for reforestation, and then trying to reach reforestation targets. The need for long-term citizen engagement, again, looking at the previous example, there's a great focus on engagement, participation, stakeholder engagement, and these are the kind of long-term solutions we need to be looking at, because if you don't include the people who live around these areas in the solutions, it's unlikely that they will be sustainable in the long term. Capacity for existing institutions to implement urban forestry solutions, and this includes research and education, and I will focus on this. But not only, obviously, in public discourse, the public institutions that predominantly fund the ones funding urban and green spaces and infrastructure in relation to urban green spaces. So they need to be included in planning, of course. Today, challenge number 2 there, again, the demand as well for practitioners. This is a huge issue, not just in relation to obviously high related cost, citizen engagement, but if you look at that first challenge, how can the people who are then going to propose innovative solutions be able to adapt and engage with these other challenges? So there also needs to be an increase in awareness and capacity in relation to innovative opportunities and exploration. So this requires education, training. And this against this background, this is where Youth Forest emerged. So we understood that we need to start, yes, at early level, but also start with what we have, so practitioners and professionals in the field. So, and we need to develop new training material and opportunities for the sector. So the aim is essentially to support students and practitioners in the implementation of their projects through education, entrepreneurship education above all. The project itself, so just very quickly, is a Knowledge Alliance. It's an Erasmus Plus, but quite a large one, and it seeks to connect universities and businesses in a range of different countries in Europe. The principal countries for intervention include Ireland, Dublin, through the partner Trinity. We then have Milan. Won't go into all of the partners here. I'll show you them in a moment. Barcelona in Spain, and Brasov, Romania, and then we have some outlier countries as well, which are feeding the project with the state of the art. Okay, yeah, so these are those. So we have ourselves and Hyssop, which is the regional entity for forest and agriculture network and research in Lombardy region in north of Italy. Then we have ourselves. We have 4 companies, again, quite innovative companies working in these solutions: Nature-Based Solutions Institute, Green City Watch, CREAF, Cresta, both based in Spain, and 4 universities. These are the core, the research institutions are the core of the project, and where most of the interventions will be held will be in the project partner university cities. So the project is quite simple, or I'm going to try and simplify it at least, and it evolves in 3 steps. First step is, and this mirrors, if you like, the 3 years of the project, just to oversimplify things even more. So the first step is in relation to developing and consolidating the network and the knowledge. So this is the join section. So in parallel to the development of the training program that I spoke about, we're also building an alliance of universities and businesses that are expert in these topics, but not only the practitioners themselves and let's say public actors, municipalities themselves, innovative municipalities who are trying to as well seek new solutions to the more demanding and complex environments that urban and peri-urban environments are. The first step, so join urban forestry. So yeah, this is, as I've just said, it's the network. The network we will be setting. We already have actually launched a platform. It's very early stages, and this is a knowledge transfer platform online where you can come, shop if you like. It's not a one-stop shop, but it's certainly a place where you can share solutions, look for information, and meet new people. And it's free at the moment, anyway. But it's free, so I invite you to please join if you're interested in these topics, as it will only be growing from this moment on. And yeah, this is some of the services that will be offered by the join platforms. You can contact major experts, especially starting from some of the top institutions, organizations in the world working on these topics through the project. and be the one to first to know to find out about updates and opportunities, as the platform will be used as a, if you like, an information point, and then share your own news, publications, and opportunities. Okay, then this is more in relation to very simply what you can do on the platform. Then there's the learning phase. So starting from research, this is, as I said, each year, each step of the project, these 3 steps will mirror, if you like, a year of the project. So we're moving into our 2nd year now of the project, where we're looking at these learn phase. And what that actually means is the collection, analysis, and development of state-of-the-art material, also scientific, but this material, the focus is not on scientific publication, more on the development of the material needed to produce state-of-the-art training in entrepreneurship, which hadn't existed before. So it's quite unique in that sense. And the idea will be to, yes, produce some reports, innovation reports, to define what innovation is, and entrepreneurship in these sectors, analyze it, barriers to it, and so on, and then produce solutions in relation to this. And yeah, so we have the scientific reports on the left. You can see there the fact sheets. We actually, in our understanding and assessment of innovation, trying to understand what it is, we analyzed 20 case studies, the best case studies, the business models, if you like. But this was taken from a much wider number. It was a qualitative study analyzing the business models of these best practices and looking at inhibitors and facilitators of innovation for these best practices. And from this, we developed the material. And this again is quite similar. I'll just give you some very sort of snapshots, if you like, of some of the case studies. We now have all 20 published on the website, and you can find these fact sheets, which essentially break down the business models of a wide range of different urban forestry solutions. Plan Natura Barcelona is not too far away on a wider scale from what was just presented on Stony Batter, and I invite you to have a look there. But for Barcelona, a more citywide plan. Then we have Wow Nature, which my colleague Jacopo will present afterwards, and GE Forest, which is a techno ICT information communication technology solution to urban forestry niche-based solutions. Okay, the learn then, with this information, we will then develop a training program, which will start with an e-learning course, accredited e-learning course for both practitioners and students on implementation of urban forestry solutions and how to be, if you like, an urban forestry entrepreneur. And then it's not all about theory. So once we have developed, coming through this training program, the final year is really the greening of your city. So we have within the project the possibility to put knowledge to practice, and we have an intensive specialization program. It's going to be like an accelerator or an incubator of ideas, which will turn into projects, which we will then implement. So the idea is to end the project with 4 multi-city tree planting campaign based on the projects that will be coming through the specialization program. Okay, and this will also be complemented by urban forestry workshops. These workshops are more specifically designed for practitioners in the cities. There will be workshops organized. As I said, most of the implementation activity will go on in the university partner cities, so Dublin, Milan, Barcelona, and Brasov in Romania. And you can just keep an eye on our website for when these activities are going to be happening. Okay, so please get involved. As I said, we're still early stages for a lot of this. We're developing the e-learning at the moment, and then we will follow on with the specialization program. Okay, it will be a 2-week program, 1 week based in Milan and 1 week based in Barcelona. And if you go through, there will be a challenge, if you like, at the end of the e-learning, where your project that will be proposed by the end of the course will be submitted into like a kind of a competitive process, where this will give you access to the specialization program based on the quality of the submission. And from this, then you can gain access to the specialization program. And Green Your City. So this, as I said, will end, the project will end in this multi-city tree planting campaign, the first of its kind in 4 different cities at the same time in Europe. It's a huge challenge for us. but we like challenges. So we're looking forward to it. We've already started discussions with the city partners on this, and we, again, for more information on this, you can follow our website as the project goes on. Okay, so that's me. I'm going to give the floor back to Roisin now. Thank you, Roisin, and I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Colm. I love the fact sheets. For any entrepreneurs or practitioners out there, they're really well worth having a look at. They kind of, if you were to frame your business using those fact sheets, you'd really be able to tell people very quickly what you do and the sustainable development goals you're linking in with, and it's quite a good breakdown. And you've got loads of examples of what other practitioners have done, and so they're really excellent. So, we'll talk to you more about how you might connect in with cities and so on at the end. But like now, we'd like to hand over the floor to Jacopo, and for Wild Nature, and yeah, it's interesting is how financing comes into this into play here, along with how we're co-creating with people. So over to you.
Thank you, Roisin, and thanks to Colm for providing me the link to one of the case studies he was showing before. So first, a couple of words about me. I'm Jacopo Giacomoni. I'm a forester, and I work as a project manager in Etifor, the consultancy company working mainly in environmental related issues. Out of the project we are running, there's Wow Nature. What is Wow Nature? Basically is a platform, an online platform powered by the spin-off Etifor, that allows people to get in touch again with nature. How? Basically putting in contact the people that are willing to support and grow their own trees in their loved forest, or also on a bigger scale, companies that are willing to sustain corporate social responsibilities, activities, and initiatives. These are put in contact with managers of forest areas. And the platform, Wow Nature, allows the link in between the two. But more practically, what can be done on the platform that is a really user-friendly interface, with a user-friendly interface? You can basically do two main activities. From one side, protecting and improving already existing forest. We don't have to forget that it's not just a matter of building and constructing new forest by planting thousands or millions of trees, but also taking care about existing forest. Especially in Italy, abandonment and degradation of the forest is a big issue. But also, of course, growing new trees. So supporting new projects that as a goal have to green the cities, or let's say urban and peri-urban areas, for what concerns the few examples I will provide you afterwards, but also natural forests. In the platform, you will find both Italian and international projects ranging from mountain forest to savannas like ecosystems like the one in Burkina Faso, to tropical forest such as the one we have in Brazil, but also really close to urban areas ones where I will come back later on. Which is one of the strengths of Wow Nature, is the fact that it's not self-referential. Once dealing with forestry, the greatest partner we work with is for sure FSC. As you know, the Forest Stewardship Council is a third-party certification scheme related to forest management, but not just forest management. And I will quickly switch to the next slides because I want to introduce you the procedure that was implemented by the Fsc Certification Scheme just a couple of years ago. That is the one that allows forest managers to certify the ecosystem services provided by the forest itself. There's a really wide range of ecosystem services that are provided by the forest, as Colm was highlighting, that range from biodiversity conservation to carbon stock to regulation of the water circle and soil conservation, and also, and this is really important for urban and peri-urban areas, the recreational values of the forest. So why is it so important to certify and to prove the impact of such project? It's important because proving the impact of your activities is a great strategy to find people willing to support these impacts. And towards Wow Nature, we have been working with a wide variety of people and companies. So to date, we have been working with thousands of citizens, so normal people, let's say, that maybe support one or few trees, to really international companies that of course work on a bigger scale and allows us to create more bigger projects and bigger impact. These are just some examples, and it's interesting to notice that they really range from let's say similar topic related companies, so working in the forestry sector, but also completely out of the box companies dealing with eyewear or workwear. So we really managed to channel funds from completely different sectors into forestry that, as we know, really needs support, and not just from the public sector, but also in the private one. A couple of example about companies we have been working with. For instance, Levico Acque is a company that sell bottled water in glass bottles. They decided to follow a path with us that is called MARC, that brings the company towards a path of sustainability and responsibility, starting from the measurement of their impact, passing through the avoidance of the impact as much as they can, of course, taking into consideration the business that they need to run anyway, and reducing as much as possible the risk of the company in comparison to what climate change and the climate crisis can impact, and just at the end capturing and communicating this path towards the project we run on Wow Nature. So it's not just let's say a donation, is really a green marketing strategy and an impactful investment that can be backed up by scientific evidence and by a third-party certification scheme, as is Fsc. The same happened for a supermarket. The Ali Market is a big supermarket company working mainly in the northeast part of Italy, and they have been working in several forests, both at urban level and in peri-urban areas, and they really work towards the engagement of the people that were purchasing stuff from their shops. So it's also an amazing green marketing strategy for them as well. So good link and good partnership in between private companies and public sector. In this case, for instance, they were really willing to, let's say, really work nearby their own shops. So we worked together with the city councils to find also the forest that works for them, that were the one really close by their shops. And I will finish by highlighting some of the most, let's say, urban and peri-urban related projects we have been running in the last years, starting from the one we run in our own city, where Etifor and me and Colm are based, that is Padova. Here we worked together with the municipality, and we decided to build 8 new urban forests, starting from a bottom-up approach. So discussing with the citizens where were the best places to start the projects, and then organizing also stakeholder engagement activities and participatory planting days, not just for let the people feel the actual work in the field, but also for sharing and let the whole community, also the one that didn't adopt the trees, be part of the process, and was highly appreciated. Another example is, for instance, a very special, I would say, urban forest that is the food forest we designed and we built in Parco Nord in Milano, so one of the biggest cities in Italy. And here we had let's say the special aspects related to the food providing trees. So we designed also a path that guided the visitors towards the identification of food trees, and where in perspective people will be able to grasp also some of the fruits of the trees. And just to underline, all these made in public land with private funds. That is not so common, I would say. A third one is a little bit more out of the city and is a peri-urban area nearby Padova as well. Just to let you know that it is also important to link different aspects and different ecosystem services. In the first couple of examples, of course, the most let's say easy to recognize were the one related to the carbon stock that in an environment such as the city is easily understandable, but also the recreational one, because we were working nearby a city. In this case, of course, there's the carbon, there's the soil, there's the recreational, because there's cycle pathways going through, but here it was crucial also the biodiversity, because we were working nearby a river that faced a lot of challenges due to the agricultural lands nearby. And with some specific project, we aimed to increase the biodiversity and to provide the locals with new green areas where to enjoy staying in the nature and experience, let's say, the rivers from a more naturalistic point of view. Last but not least, another smaller, I would say, project we run in the hilly area, a little bit towards Verona, that is a little bit more, let's say, halfway between Padova and Milano. It was a project about planting trees nearby a cycle path. And here it was really practical, a practical necessity from the manager that was provide the shade for the people cycling. Of course, you may say is a long-term initiative, because it will require ages for the trees to provide a great shade, but still somewhere we need to start. And in this case, it was a partnership, again backed up by private funds in public land. So another great example of partnership between the public and the private sector. I move to the last slide, that is just some really easy, understandable take-home messages. The first one is be creative, in the sense that the world is changing so fast and the challenges are so incredible and urgent right now, that maybe something that no one was thinking about can work anyway. And I'm referring to these ideas of maybe doing a food forest, maybe try to ask a company selling water bottles to finance a project in a city near really far away from their own headquarters, and it worked. So why not being creative and try to push the limit as far as possible? And the second one is really practical and is let's say a really touchable outcome of our experience, that is that private investment can't substitute the public one, but can be strategic to integrate and to back up when the public maybe is not willing to support or is not able but has the willingness, can back up interesting and impactful project, not just in the wilderness, but also where people can take the most probably out of the forest that are urban and peri-urban areas. With this, I finished and I'm available later on for a further discussion. Thanks, and I will stop sharing in a while.
Thank you so much, Jacopo. They're excellent case examples, giving us a real idea of what we can achieve, backed up by the robust processes, which you kind of take companies on this journey to completely change their own system and then work with you. I know Colin's told me about that as well. So it's I think it's really the way we could, it's a really, really excellent model for how we go forward, and it would be interesting to see how we can scale it up. Now I'd like to welcome Max Hyssop of Clyde Climate Forest. I have to tell you that when we heard in Cork that this was happening, the Clyde Urban Forest and Climate Forest, how did they get it over the line? And Cork councillors wanted to plant 1 million trees in Cork, and they were told they can't by the engineers. So how did you do it? And what are your challenges, and how's it going for you?
Thank you, Roisin. I'm hoping you can see my slide now, and I should first of all explain that we haven't done it yet. So the Clyde Climate Forest is a relatively new project, and what you can see is a picture of the 8 leaders of the 8 councils that make up Glasgow City region, and they were very enthusiastic about the concept of the Clyde Climate Forest, and were keen to come out and be seen and photographed planting trees a year ago in the spring of last year, planting a tree to endorse the project, to endorse the Clyde Climate Forest. And then they launched the project at their cabinet meeting on the 1st of June last year. So you can see that we are less than 1 year old. And of course, we haven't planted 1 million trees. And in fact, our aim is to plant 18 million trees, as you'll hear in a short while. But we've only just embarked upon that. So I'm sorry if I'm disappointing you, Roisin. We haven't yet done it, but we have big ambitions. Politicians, I think, love the idea of trees. If they can be photographed planting a tree, then that's great for their image and great, I suppose, for their electoral chances next time they come to the ballot box. I suppose the only thing that tops trees is really being able to hold a baby and give it a kiss. But in the absence of a tree, an absence of a baby, planting a tree is the next best thing. So, but it's great to have the enthusiasm of local leaders, local politicians in our region behind such an ambitious project like the Clyde Climate Forest. And as I've already mentioned, the Clyde Climate Forest has a big ambition. It's to plant 18 million trees over the next decade. And we didn't just pluck that figure out of the air because somehow or other 18 million seemed like a nice number. This is based on Scottish Government's climate change plan, which says that we should be increasing woodland areas across Scotland by 3% over the next decade. A 3% increase in woodland in our region amounts to something in the order of 18 million trees. But it also happens neatly to mean that we will be having to plant 10 trees for every man, woman and child that live in our region. You'll be able to work out, therefore, that we have 1.8 million people living in Glasgow City region. But really, it isn't about numbers. Politicians like the numbers, of course, and they like this kind of headline, but actually it's about getting the right trees in the right places, and also for the right reasons. Our primary reason for the Clyde Climate Forest is as a response to the climate emergency that we all face. We have to be ambitious in our efforts to face up to the problems that climate change will bring us, and trees are part of the solution. And we need to be getting on with the job. Business as usual will not be enough when it comes to dealing with the problem of climate change, or indeed in terms of the ecological crisis, which is an equal concern. But if we're going to deliver on this ambition of 80 million trees, we have to get the right trees in the right places. And so we've constructed the Clyde Climate Forest around our 3 Cs: canopy, connectivity, and carbon. The Clyde Climate Forest isn't all urban. It's about tree planting across the whole region, but we have a very large urban area within Glasgow City region, as you will see shortly. And so the first C, canopy, is about urban tree canopy. It's about increasing the amount of leaf cover that we have in the urban parts of our region for all the many benefits that we know that urban trees can bring. And we've heard some of those benefits from Colm earlier on. But it's also about planting trees to connect up our woodland habitats. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. And it's also about planting new forests and woodlands to lock up carbon. And there's a lot of interest, as we all know, about investing in trees because of that ability that they have to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and to lock it up within their cell structure. So this is the framework in which we are developing the Clyde Climate Forest. This is a graphic representation of Glasgow City region. You can see in the inset map of Scotland there where Glasgow City region sits to the west of central Scotland. And in the graphic, you can see there that the dark green area represents the urban part, or the urban conurbation of Glasgow, if you like. And the River Clyde flows from the southern uplands in the south of our region, past Lanark, through the urban city centre, and then flows out into the sea at Greenock. And so this is the pretty much the catchment for the River Clyde, and it's across the region that we will be planting trees. But the Fsc Canopy is focused in on the urban part, and we are perhaps looking to plant something in the order of 1.5 million trees to meet our ambitions for canopy cover in the urban part of Greater Glasgow. We will also be looking to work with landowners to plant new woodlands, new native woodlands in targeted locations across the region in order to create this migratory corridor for wildlife. As the climate changes, species are having to migrate north, and we need to give them the corridors to escape the changing climate and move into preferred areas. Otherwise, they will have a bleak future. And then finally, we need to be expanding our forests and woodlands across the region to be in line with Scottish Government's climate change plan, but really importantly, to lock up some of the emissions that are being belched into the atmosphere from urban centres like Glasgow. And that will mean that we will be having to plant something in the order of 1,000 hectares every year within our region in order to meet our ambitions. That means a doubling of the current rate of tree planting that's going on in the region. So a real step uplift in activity, and business as usual will not meet that ambition. So how did the Clyde Climate Forest come about? Well, in 2019, we had a general election in the United Kingdom towards the end of 2019, and there was a lot of discussion about how many trees the different political parties were going to commit to. There was an awakening, I suppose, to the climate and ecological crises, and this was a large part of the debate in the lead up to the election in December 2019. And in fact, in the different political party manifestos, there was almost a bidding war about how many trees they could promise to the electorate through their manifesto. And you can see there's some really big numbers there. It's great that politicians are all of a sudden perhaps enthusiastic about trees. And as a forester, I'm really pleased to get that kind of response. But I don't think they really have much clue about what these numbers mean, or indeed where those trees can be planted and how tricky it can be to achieve those kind of numbers. But it's within this context of enthusiasm for tree expansion that we developed the concept of the Clyde Climate Forest, based around these 3 Cs as I've already mentioned. So I'm going to now move on to just looking primarily at the first C, the canopy cover C, which of course is of most relevance to this webinar, but I will touch briefly on the other 2 Cs as well. So here's a map of the urban parts of our region, the conurbation of Glasgow, if you like. And the conurbation stretches over 8 municipalities, 8 council areas, with Glasgow City Council in the centre there, which is almost entirely urban, but the urban area stretches out into this other 7 municipalities as well. We commissioned high resolution aerial photography of these urban areas 2 years ago, and then last year Forest Research undertook an analysis of those high resolution aerial photographs to produce an output, a data set, which shows all the trees within the urban areas and allows us to calculate urban tree canopy. And this is the data output from that analysis. And you can see it gives you an impression, I suppose, about the distribution of trees within those urban areas. Some areas there's more green, other areas there's less. And if you can see in the city centre there, there's very few trees right in the heart of Glasgow, where it's so heavily urbanized. But with this data set, we can now say with real confidence that on average, the urban parts of Glasgow City region have 17% tree canopy cover. Now that's interesting because Forest Research's research recommends that we should be striving for a minimum of 20% tree canopy cover in cities within the UK in the face of climate change. So there's work to be done. 17% isn't good enough. We need to be striving for 20, and indeed many people are advocating much higher levels of tree canopy. 30% is one figure which is being promoted at the moment. So there's a lot of work to be done in a post-industrial city like Glasgow, which has few trees at the moment. The richness of our data means that we can also say with equal confidence that the different municipalities, the different council areas have these levels of canopy cover. And you can see the Glasgow city in the middle there has the lowest, it's just over 16%, and that's not surprising because it's so heavily urbanized. And it increases to just over 20% in that council area just to the north. But that's not to say that they're off the hook, because in certain parts of that area, that municipality, there are neighborhoods with very low canopy cover levels. So all councils have work to do. So looking in at just one council area, this is North Lanarkshire Council. We can zoom in and look at the data set just for North Lanarkshire. And you can see that urban area to the north, it's called Cumbernauld. That was a new town built in the 60s and 70s with a lot of tree planting going on. And you can see that in this image here. But the heavy industrial areas are in the southern part of North Lanarkshire, where there are steelworks in the past and lots of mining and so on. They have very few tree canopy cover. And this is shown more clearly when you show the average or the percentage canopy cover by community council areas. And you can see there's darker green in the north and lighter green to the south. So it's the lighter green areas that we are interested in. But I've just now introduced a different additional data set, which identifies postcode areas or neighborhoods, if you like, which are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change because of their deprivation status and because of their vulnerability to cloudburst events and flooding and to heat wave events and overheating. So where these two data sets coincide, and I'll just zoom in on that, where these two data sets coincide, these are the areas of particular interest to us. So in discussion with council officers, we've identified these 4 neighborhoods as target areas for the work of the Clyde Climate Forest in terms of urban forestry. And you can see the statistics I just brought on screen there, very low canopy cover and quite a number of vulnerable postcodes in each one of these communities. So just focusing in on the Bells Hill Community Council area, we can zoom in even further with the data set that we've created. And you can see, although Bells Hill has a canopy cover of just over 10%, most of that 10% is located around transport corridors and in parks and other green space. When you look at the streets where people live in and around the vulnerable postcodes, there are even fewer trees. And with the wonders of Google Street Map, you can just drop in and have a look at those streets and see what the opportunities are in those streets for tree planting. And so that's what I've done here, and just 4 locations kind of dropped in through the internet and had a look at what's going on in these streets. On the face of it, there's plenty of opportunities for tree planting within Bells Hill. Large green space areas like the one in number 1 there with a few trees on them, but there must be opportunity for more. The ends of streets like in 2 and 3, in 2, these are publicly managed areas, presumably mown by the council. And in 3, those are private gardens, but large gardens at the junction of streets, lots of impermeable tarmac, which will flood when it rains and will heat up when there's a heat wave. And, you know, the trees in these areas will make these streets much more livable and comfortable in the future. And then in picture number 4, a slightly different configuration, but you've got gardens and green spaces there, regularly gang mowed on a road leading up to a primary school. It must be, you know, an area that we should be focusing in on. So the bottom line is there's lots of opportunities for tree planting in this area, but it's not just about finding the green spaces. It's about working with the local people to get their buy-in to the tree planting. And I think Suzanne really, you know, I was really fascinated by her presentation. She's further down the line than we are. Lots to be learned from what's going on in Dublin. And we've got to bring those kind of community engagement activities to these streets and with these people to allow us to get trees into these kind of locations. So Bells Hill is just one of 16 target neighborhoods that we've identified across the city region. You can see them highlighted in red in this image. Many of these areas are very similar to Bells Hill. They're residential areas, very low canopy cover, and vulnerable communities. So we want to see much more of this kind of activity. This was a tree planting that we did around COP26, which was held in Glasgow just last November. And of course, it's all about engaging with local people to get them involved in the trees and to get their buy-in to the idea of these trees. So that's the majority of my presentation. I'll rapidly just run through the other C's here. When it comes to the connectivity element, it's all about our regional woodland habitat network. We've had fantastic analysis undertaken for us by Forest Research again. And what you can see here in the dark green is our woodland habitat networks. And the light green dots are the key opportunities where if we can create native woodlands, we can make significant connections between those woodland habitats. But more than that, we're also interested about creating a migratory corridor. And you can see in central Scotland that you've got this pinch point because of the topography of Scotland. We've got the Firth of Forth, the inlet to the east. We've got the Firth of Clyde to the west. So the landmass is itself a pinch point. But on top of that, we've got upland areas highlighted in blue. We've got the urban areas highlighted in grey. And what we need to do is create a kind of thread the needle. We need to find this corridor to allow species to move from the southern part of Scotland to the northern part of Scotland through this, this pinch point. And that's what we've done with great work again done by us by Forest Research, who have identified additional suite of connections that we need to make to create these corridors. And so we are now going to be incentivizing landowners to deliver on these locations. And so Scottish Forestry, the Scottish Government's forestry agency, has created a new grant to incentivize landowners to plant trees in these very particular locations, in these target areas for connectivity. And that's going to be launched in the next few weeks. So that'll be a tremendous tool for us to engage with landowners and see trees planted in the right locations. So that's the connectivity element. And then the final element is about creating new forests and farmland, new forests and woodlands, primarily on farmland, but also on the vacant and derelict land that we have in our region. Lots of post-industrial landscapes in our region. And that ties in with Scottish Government's climate change plan, as I've already mentioned, but it also links to our regional forest and woodland strategy. And within that strategy, it identifies lots of potential areas and preferred areas for tree planting in our region. We're looking to fit in another 9,000 hectares in our region. 9,000 hectares is about 18 million trees. And that can be done, but it's all about engagement with landowners. And I'm glad to say that we're getting a good response from landowners. Across the piece, it touches on both adaptation and mitigation to climate change. There's lots of delivery partners working with us, lots of them coming from the third sector. The Woodland Trust is funding the initiative and has allowed the team to get set up. But we also need to be working with communities, businesses, and landowners, as we've already heard. Roisin wanted me to focus on what's going well. Well, we've got great political support. We've got a lot of business interest, a lot of enthusiasm generally for the whole concept of climate forest, and we have landowner interest. But the things that are not so good are there's a business as usual attitude, particularly, I think, within certain departments in our councils. The street team, the team that look after the road, see trees as a problem, not as an asset. And, you know, they are looking for reasons, if you like, not to have trees, they're not encouraging trees. Clearly, there's issues about departmental budgets, and perhaps the initiative will be able to bring new financial resources to bear. But also there's a capacity issue. We're talking about a lot of new work here. We need a lot of new people working on this. So I was very interested to hear Colm talking about the training in this area, and I certainly will be investigating that. And I have a very particular problem at the moment. I can't recruit my team. So here's a job advert here and now. If anybody's interested in working with us on this initiative, I'm looking for a development manager. And if you're interested, please get in touch with me. If you've got the right kind of skills, please get in touch with me. And here is my email address if you are interested. You can also download a brochure about the Clyde Climate Forest at our website. So thanks for listening.
Thanks a million, Max. It's a very great overview. There's lots and lots I could say here about it. I really liked how justice is starting to come into this, where we're seeing this too on Connecting Nature. So you're specifically targeting kind of more challenging areas who might have different viewpoints about the benefits of trees. I know people have said some people are not happy about trees. And are quite scared of them almost. So there is that long process is there. So I could almost ask the panelists, you probably have lots of questions for each other. I have one here in the chat, see if I can get it back up. Maybe if you could all come off your mics. Yeah, Aidan French has one for Suzanne. The socio-political aspects are at the crux, as you mentioned. I'm still not clear on what precisely got things over the line. Can you explain how you and your team finally persuaded the doubters and objectors? Please elaborate.
Yeah, so I suppose, yeah, sorry, it was kind of a rushed presentation. You know, it was a long process. I suppose the first step is kind of figuring out who are the working with the willing, and normally they're the neighbours of people who potentially are objectors. So bringing all of those people into conversation. And I think that was definitely the challenging thing with COVID, that we weren't able to meet in person. But what we ended up doing was a lot of on-street meetings. You know, I think I've been trying to up my skills a lot in the last 2 years of, you know, active listening. So a lot of the time about this is giving voice for discussion within the public realm, and let's get offline, because obviously we all know about keyboard warriors, and it starts to become quite tense. So that really is it. It's conversation, dialogue, everyone kind of coming into conversation and speaking about their needs. You know, a lot of this in terms of objections is to do with fear, and I mentioned the loss aversion ratio, which is really valuing more what you have now versus what you can gain in the future. So trying to get into dialogue with people about that. So I think the dialogue and listening was a big step to get over the line with the majority of people. And then there's some points where we can't get an agreement, and we have to kind of balance the needs of the street first of all, but then the wider neighborhood and the city. So that is the challenge, you know, that we have. We're not just going to be able to listen to one person if they're not going to meet us halfway. You know, number one, if there's someone really against a tree outside their house, we don't put it there. And we try and address the needs of people as much as possible, but sometimes we don't get there. But we have found now when the trees have gone in, things have gone quiet. We're not getting the complaints. So I think that idea of the fear of what's to come hasn't been as high. So that's the advantage of once you get going. I'm hoping I will have an easier journey with tree planting. Obviously, there's going to be more challenges, but I think hopefully we're getting over the line with that.
Yeah, and I think having the tests, the planters there temporarily, the pop-ups, they probably helped as well get people thinking about things differently.
Yeah, and I think the fact is that sometimes people don't realize that like their other neighbors might want them, that they're kind of, there's suddenly this kind of fight that starts to go on with you, the council, as this kind of big body doing things to them, which I completely understand. It's their street, it's their neighborhood. So I think by having the conversations on the streets, looking at children playing around the trees, looking at older people who potentially the streets are now safer. So kind of playing with those perceptions about what the trees equal. You know, there is a history of trees, large trees being planted in the wrong place. So, you know, we're on this battle then of pruning, the leaves not getting cleaned up, you know, and this also this idea that the council is there to do things. I think we're trying to get towards a process of collaboration, because you know the resources of the council aren't necessarily there to do all of this kind of maintenance that people historically would have desired in terms of spraying everything, sanitized environments, no weeds. So there's a big conversation that has to happen around that, about you know the role of the council and the role of communities and how do we collaborate. Yeah, lots to figure out on that.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Are you
Thanks.
finding you have enough funding once? So would you find this idea of partnering with businesses appealing, or do you have a model in place for that? I suppose I'd ask Max that question, and Colin and Jacob as well. Like this idea of a model for, are there barriers to doing that in Dublin City Council?
That for me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what? I suppose at this point in time, we have had the capital funding for projects. We have a small team. So our challenge is actually getting agreement, working through the whole council in terms of permissions, all of the roads, colleagues, drainage, conservation, the public. That's where we're having difficulty, and the funding is there at the moment. But I think once we start to get a rhythm in terms of knowing the topology, I think funding might become a challenge. But I think I wouldn't be potentially working with private funding because I just don't have time. So it's trying to figure out, you know, who does those funding applications and those collaborations. But then at this point in time, we have a need to, but who knows what's coming down the line? You know, the conditions might change.
Yeah, great. Can I ask Colin and Jacopo, how important is this co-creation piece when it comes to creating urban forestry? And you know, when we think of U-Forest, is that a skill set that you're calling out for in U-Forest as well?
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah, we consider it a skill set. So we carried out from the perspective of entrepreneurship training and training in general of these practitioners, and even at student level, so existing urban foresters, if you like, or so we carried out a training needs assessment at Europe-wide scale, and to understand, as the project is European funded, so we're looking mostly at urban forestry in the European context. And so what I can say is, from the perspective of the results of this particular survey, we were able to identify that co-creation is fundamental to training programs. It doesn't exist at the moment. It's these kind of provision of these kind of programs with these thematics embedded in them. So, but there are other connected, I would say, solutions. I want to call them nature-based solutions, but connected solutions in provision of new services. I would say more social than environmental in urban areas. For example, like tactical urbanism is a term that's emerging at the moment, which really involves communities and citizens more, and really is based on co-creation. Trying to find solutions, as I said, not only green solutions, but social solutions to improve derelict areas, this kind of thing, and improve, let's say, more underprivileged areas, urban areas, and areas in urban settings. So I would say fundamental to the training process, fundamental to the what we've seen so far. And for what regards the application of urban forests, yeah, better that maybe Jacopo speaks about this from the Padova O2 experience, where we successfully, through co-creation, and this was a public-private partnership with the municipality of Padova City, where we did a lot of work. We did a lot of work beforehand with the municipality, and we were very lucky. We had a forward-thinking municipality who was actually interested in doing something more with I would say in some cases abandoned, in some cases unused green areas in the urban context in Padova City. But it wasn't just about that. It was about engaging the people living around these areas. And to be honest, I'm just thinking about one particular area which is under a freeway. And this particular freeway was built recently, much to the dismay of the residents. And essentially speaking with them, so we spoke with a lot of the citizens, because then we were engaging with them. They were also part of the financing of the forest that was then projected. And speaking with many of them throughout the process, what they didn't want was the freeway there, but the freeway was already there, and underneath the freeway there wasn't a lot you could do with the accept plant. What's emerged, and you can see it on the Wow Nature website now, is essentially a forest is growing under this freeway as a result of the Paddle O2 projects. Biodiversity is enhanced, and it's a much more visually attractive setting environment than it was beforehand. So, and this was done through, if you like, a previous co-creation space. But I don't know, maybe Jacopo, if you want anything to add to that particular example. We have others, but I think that's one that stands out for me.
Yes, I mean, I can just briefly complement saying that the platform is user-friendly and easy to see. What's behind the platform is, of course, a lot of work and a lot of professionals working in their respective field of action. So as Colm said, apart from the results, before there's a lot of effort in coordinating the owner of the land, finding the nursery that is willing to support the project, the forest company, and there are several constraints, of course, also when it comes to authorization processes. So for sure, if you don't have a good coordination activity, it's almost impossible to finalize this kind of process. But the way to finalize them and give the project a future is for sure by cooperating with the local stakeholders, because if not, it's like some European project that provide a great outputs, and as soon as the funding finished, everything is just abandoned. While on the other hand, if you start working collaborating with the locals, then they feel part of the process, and also at the end of the activity, they see the future, they see the path they have been going through, and they see also the perspective in the long term. Because we always have to remind that, especially for instance when dealing with companies that are nowadays always having results in a blink of an eye. So they think they put money and the day after everything is amazing, there's the forest, there's everything, but the forest and the nature have its own time, and is a time that is measured in decades and not in days or months. So providing the support in the long term is essential to have something that in the long term is valuable for the city, for the people living there, and for the community, generally speaking.
Yeah, I think that's really key. So which brings me then terms to Max as well. It's this idea of annual payments for ecosystem services that landowners could provide, whether that's in a city or any landowner. In the funding models that you're just about to launch, is apart from helping landowners plant trees, is there consideration given to long-term maintenance, annual maintenance and care of trees? Because I think what we're all seeing is this co-creation process takes time, and this convincing landowners to plant 18 million trees, or how many million trees we need, is really takes a lot of doing. And so is this kind of annual ecosystem services model coming in a payment for annual ecosystem services? Mike?
Well, yes, first of all, yes, just to underline the process, I think, from having a concept through to a strategy through to delivery has been, well underlined by Suzanne. The lead in time it takes if you're going to work with people rather than just dump trees on people and hope that they will grow. But then, of course, planting a tree isn't the end of the story. It's actually the growing of the trees that delivers the benefits. It's not the planting of the trees, it's the growing of the trees that delivers all the range of benefits, as we all know. And so that means that obviously we have to be planting the right trees in the right places, but then we've got to look after those trees as well to make sure that they deliver the benefits we've promised. Now, in rural areas, I think certainly in the Scottish context, that consideration is pretty much taken care of. you know, that the majority of those 18 million trees that I've talked about will be planted in rural areas and will be planted using state grants from Scottish Government. And, you know, there will be a clawback of funding from landowners if those trees do not grow and grow well into the future. So in a way that the landowners are compelled to ensure those trees grow. The problems start when you are talking about the much more expensive and much more difficult to plant trees that we want to see planted in urban areas. And, you know, first of all, the trees are more expensive. The whole process of getting a site for them to be planted and the engineering that's required around them is expensive. And then, you know, they are hostage to a lot more misfortune potentially in the future, those trees, because of the very hostile environments they're being planted in, whether that's to do with the urban sort of physical environment or from the damage that it might receive from people or just neglect and that sort of thing. So all our plans are about not just about the cost of tree planting, but to include the cost of care thereafter. Clearly, we want to involve local people in that process of adopting and looking after the trees, but it's only so far that can go. So resources need to be there to look after the trees. And in Glasgow, there's a very interesting project underway called Trees as Infrastructure, and I've been working alongside this project. And that's looking at the value of trees, urban trees, and looking for the potential to, if you like, to realize that value from investors in trees. It's a very exciting prospect. I suppose it's almost like the holy grail for urban forestry. It's, you know, it's the kind of way that urban forestry people have been talking for a long time, but nobody's really grasped the nettle in the way that I think this project is attempting to. I'm hoping they're successful, because if they are, then what we will see is a new stream of funding coming into urban forestry. You know, it'll break that mold or create a new mold perhaps for supporting and driving delivery of trees into urban areas, perhaps by insurance companies who want to reduce risks from damage to climate change, perhaps from health companies who wish to see a reduction in health risks, perhaps from others, you know, other investors. We'll have to wait and see whether that's successful. But in that model, they are not just looking at the cost of trees, they're looking at the costs of sustaining those trees into the future and comparing that with the delivery of benefits as the trees grow. So I think that's really interesting and something to keep an eye on. Glasgow is a test city, one of, I think, 3 or 4 they're going to be testing out a prototype on across Europe. I can't tell you offhand what the other cities are, but Glasgow is certainly leading the way on that project, and I'm sure there'll be more about that in the months to come.
Yeah, that would be great. And just to kind of see graphs of benefits and kind of visuals on what can happen there. Okay, we have to wrap up. It's gone very fast. I knew it would. Have we one take-home message each, what you would like to see happen? Because I think we've got good solutions here. So, but we all know the problem is scaling out. So from each of you, could I have one take-home message? What would you like to see happen in order to scale out these solutions we've been talking about today? Thank you so much for joining, everybody, and great questions. And thank you everybody who came on board to participate, and thank you very, very much to our speakers. Wonderful presentation. So one take-home message of what you'd like to see happening so we can scale out, or how we could help each other scale out. Maybe start with Colin.
Yeah, I mean, mine is quite simple. I mean, if you're actively involved in urban forestry topics and you want to make change, a good start is what the message I'm trying to get across is we need education and innovation and entrepreneurship education, new solutions, or, you know, putting existing solutions together. So the take-home message is don't be afraid to go back to education if you're already involved in these topics, and we can support you with that.
I mean, I can go next. My one is quite easy. Wownator is an international platform, and Fsc is a global standard. So the limit is the word for the initiative. So we will be really willing to enlarge it and to scale up international contexts such as the UK, Scotland, or whatever. And I think that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which train you take, let's say, as far as the train is going in the proper direction. So let's all work for the same goal, that is greening the cities in this case and greening the planet to face the climate crisis.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll go next if you like. You know, I think we know what we need to do. We know why we need to do it. We have the technical know-how to grow trees in urban areas. What we need is the capacity. We need more people working in this sector. And so education, as Colin says, is going to be really important to bring new people and new capacity into the area. That's why I'm having problems recruiting. There's just not enough people to go around at the moment. And of course, we need a new way of funding those people and funding the new trees. And that's where the innovation comes in. Trees AI is a potential innovation route. I mean, the WOW project that Jacopo was talking about sounds very innovative as well, but we need to come up with these new ways to provide the wherewithal to deliver the trees, as well as the people to do it.
Suzanne?
Yeah, no, I would echo, I think in terms of the people to do it, I think that's the thing, building the teams. We just don't have enough within our department even to actually be expanding as fast as we can. So just hope that the desire is coming from the younger people, but also within councils and governments, that they're actually starting to value these roles, and there's more funding in for the resourcing for staff, basically. And I think as well, you know, we're working with Willing in this conversation. I think anyone who's joined this conversation is already on the train for more trees. So the question is about communication and constantly changing the narrative, because I think there's kind of a jaded narrative as well sometimes connected to the green agenda and climate change. So some people switch off. So trying to figure out what is that conversation that can get more and more people involved.
Thank you. That's a wonderful point to finish up with. Once again, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks to Fiona from Horizon, you on the tech side as well. Please do join us on Connecting Nature if you're an enterprise and you want to start helping out and networking with each other. Once again, thank you to each and every of our speakers. It's wonderful, and we wish you well for the rest of the day. All the best, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
okay,
everyone.
cheers. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.